Good evening.
Hola.
I'm honored to be here tonight and be a part of Montana's second annual Transgender Day of Remembrance. This is a very special day for me. A day on which I can publicly share and celebrate the life of a very special woman that I was given the blessing to meet, care for, learn from, and most importantly, love. As Kendra said, my name is Michelle Alexander, and I'm a home health hospice nurse. I've been a registered nurse for almost a quarter of a century, the majority of my career being in home health and hospice. In that time, I have had the opportunity to care for hundreds of ill and dying patients, covering a broad spectrum of humanity, including the rich and the poor, the old and the young, male and female, of various numerous nationalities and cultural backgrounds. In the year 2006, I was blessed with an assignment to care for a patient who touched my heart and touched my life in a way that no other patient ever had. Her name was Michelle, and she was a transgender woman. She was put on our home health services initially for a 7-day course of IV antibiotics for a respiratory infection. What began as a 7-day course of antibiotics turned into a 4.5-month expedition into identity, gender, and unconditional acceptance that affected me profoundly. Until the time when I had met Michelle, my experience with the transgender community was virtually non-existent. My only encounter was in a well-known drag club in Portland, Oregon, that my mother took me to when I was 21. Her intention at that time was to broaden my horizons, considering I was born and raised in Butte and had had very little exposure to diversity. Before meeting Michelle, my mental image of a transgender person was what I had witnessed in the drag club. What I know now is a very unrealistic portrait of the transgender community. So, based on my limited exposure, my limited knowledge, my limited experience, I assumed that Michelle was a male who chose to dress like a female. I thought of her as a transvestite, a term largely acknowledged today as obsolete. I soon discovered that my prejudices regarding Michelle were equally obsolete. Michelle had another unique quality about her. Michelle was blind. Completely blind. No shadows, no nothing. But she had a relatively powerful memory of having had some sight up until the time she was 18 months old. What she thought she remembered possibly was the color red and the color green. That's it. That's all she remembered ever seeing. I would like all of you to consider for just a brief moment the kind of awareness it would require to be sure of one's own inner identity despite being blind. She had no one and nothing to compare herself to on an external basis. She only had her own deep, innate sense of self, her inner vision to guide her on her long and painful journey. To my eternal shame, I confess for the first 3 weeks of our relationship, I felt awkward around Michelle, and I found myself repeatedly judging her. I remained very respectful of her, but internally I was judging her. And secretly, I certainly hoped she could not sense this, which she did, as we talked about. She's told me, you were scared to death of me. So at that time, I was really conflicted. I was uncomfortable with her and more uncomfortable with myself for my inability to find a measure of acceptance for my new patient. My discomfort with Michelle continued for about 3 weeks. I was very curious and I wanted to ask a lot of questions, but I didn't want to appear nosy, and I didn't want to offend her. But she must have sensed my curiosity because she broke the ice by telling me, if you have the courage to ask, I have the courage to answer. That's all it took to begin the process of opening my mind and my heart to her. Michelle became my teacher, and I gladly became her student. She gave me books to read and videos to watch. With each assignment, the questions multiplied, and my curiosity grew by leaps and bounds. She answered each and every question that I had with openness, honesty, based on her knowledge and experience. She then gave me her journal to read, which she shared with very, very few people in the 56 years that she had been alive. This journal that she had was typed on an old-fashioned typewriter, not a Braille typewriter. And remember, she was blind. It was in its original manila folder when she gave it to me, which I still have as of today. And it covered the years from 1988 to close right around the beginning of 1991. And that was during the time of Michelle's transition from Michael to Michelle. And it was filled with her deepest emotions, her darkest fears. And reading it, I discovered that her daily existence was filled with pain, rejection, fear, moral questions, the likes of which I never considered. This is the time that my heart now opens to my new friend, Michelle. I, too, had been blind. But now my eyes were open and I understood. I could see that being transsexual was not a choice, nor a lifestyle. It could only have come from within. I finally realized that it was not about the clothing, nor was it merely about being feminine, but instead wholly concerned with identity, a deep sense of self. The core of this realization was her blindness. She did not have a visual construct of what a female or a man would look like. She could not look at another woman and think, that's what I want to look like. That's how I want to dress. At that time, it was about the time I started crossing professional boundaries with Michelle. And I had never done this in 20 years of being a nurse. I began visiting her on my off time. I introduced her to my husband and my two children, they were 9 and 12 at the time. My family accepted her and took her under our wing and made her part of our family. She visited our home on several occasions, including her 57th birthday. I gave her my cell phone number, my email address, my home phone number. It just kind of rolled right off my tongue. I had never done that before. But it just felt like it was the right thing to be doing. Michelle transitioned in Kalispell in the late 1980s. And I believe Kalispell had about 7,000 people at that time, maybe. And so when I say that her transition was completely and utterly an act of self-determination, courage, and iron will. Like many in the transgender community, she had no guidance, no assistance, and very few resources to draw upon, a situation that was complicated by her blindness. She could not find a physician to prescribe her hormone therapy. She did find a counselor in Kalispell, but of course he had no knowledge of gender issues, so she was teaching him. And nor did he have any experience working with the transgender community. She had very little support from her friends and family, and the employment possibilities in Kalispell for a blind trans woman in the late 80s was extremely limited. But despite all the adversities in her path, she did not let them stop her in her quest. Instead, the obstacles she encountered made her all the more determined to become the person that she knew herself to be, that she had known herself to be since she was a small child.